Let me proceed with the second part of the presentation, which is to provide more context on the Philippine Progreso, which is the Philippine Program for Recovery with Equity and Solidarity. I will focus on the resiliency aspect, building on what Secretary Dominguez has explained. And the whole idea of our recovery program is really how we can turn this crisis into an opportunity. But before I go to the details, let me first, tell the story of where we are coming from to provide context on where we are headed. In 2020, January, the Philippines entered the year with very strong growth and development prospects. We have been building on past reforms and our solid macroeconomic management to do better. Prior to COVID, we were among the fastest growing economies in the region. And we were likely to become upper middle income country like China, Thailand, and Malaysia today, prior to COVID. We have seen low and stable inflation. And because of our reforms, the strong economic prospects, and because of build, we have seen the lowest rates of unemployment, underemployment, and poverty. In fact, in 2016, the Duterte government committed to reducing poverty by 6 million Filipinos by 2022. What actually happened when we saw the 2018 data is that we have actually achieved our target 4 years in advance, when the poverty rate revised was brought down from around 23% to around 17%, thereby lifting 6 million Filipinos out of poverty 4 years ahead of schedule. We have been seeing one of the strongest fiscal positions in our history, and our debt to GDP ratio have seen the smallest amount in also our history. We also have very high international reserves. And what all these mean is that we are seen very well by the international credit rating agencies, with a BBB plus credit rating for our sovereign borrowings. And what that means, for instance, if we are to borrow 1 trillion pesos today to fund the COVID response, and we are able to save, instead of higher interest rates, we are able to save 1% interest rate. That what basically means is we are saving 10 billion pesos, which instead of paying the creditors, can be used to fund our COVID response. And this is because we have been very conservative and responsible in managing our fiscal position. We have done 4 tax reform laws, and there are 3 more upcoming. We have done a number of structural reforms, including the rice tariffication, the ease of doing business. We have put in place the legal framework for the national ID, the universal health care, and the universal access to tertiary education. So all of these are actually helping us in these times of difficulty. Imagine if we enter 2020 without doing any of the tax reform, we would not have enough fiscal space or revenues to fight COVID initially. Imagine also if we enter 2020 without doing rice tariffication, people will still be buying rice that is 10 peso per kilo more expensive than today. And the other thing that we have been doing well, I think, is the Build program, which have exceeded 5% of GDP in 2018. And in 2019, despite the delay in the passage of the budget, we were able to accelerate our build spending, such that by the end of 2019, we actually exceeded the infrastructure spending target. Unfortunately, this very good start was hampered by 3 totally unexpected shocks. The Taal volcano eruption in 2020 January, the decline of tourism and trade starting from China because of the pandemic, and our decision to impose the enhanced community quarantine starting March, so that we can prioritize the saving of lives, including your own family and friends. And so this is where we are starting from. Now, where we are now, the Development Budget and Coordination Committee has recently revised our program for the macro fiscal framework. We are now seeing from 6% growth in 2019 to a contraction in GDP by 2 to 3.4%. What that means is our nominal GDP would fall from 19.5 trillion last year to around 19.3 trillion in 2020. Our revenues would also fall from 16.1% to 13.6%. And a big part of this is that we have allowed businesses to defer the payment of taxes, and also taking into consideration that many businesses are not earning and therefore are unlikely to pay the same amount of taxes. On the other hand, notice that our expenditure program has not shrunk. From 19.5% of GDP, it is expected to grow to 21.7% of GDP, representing the initial stimulus, economic and fiscal stimulus that we are putting into the economy to help fight the pandemic and help the country recover. As a result, our deficit to GDP has increased from 3.4% last year to around 8.1%, and we are ready to provide further stimulus up to 9% of GDP in deficit. As a result, we will have to borrow for the time being, so our national government debt to GDP would increase from 39.6 to 49.8%. All of these show a weakening of our macro fiscal framework. Nonetheless, the fundamentals are still very strong. And this is the result of all the efforts of this government and the previous ones to maintain fiscal discipline. And although the debt to GDP has increased, this is still very sustainable and much, much lower compared to the almost 80% of GDP of debt that we saw in 2004. We have been listening to the people very attentively to design our recovery program. In April, the first week, we fielded 3 surveys, one for consumers, which had 389,000 respondents, one for micro, small, and medium enterprises, and many of you in the PCCI, I understand, answered this survey, which resulted in 44,000 respondents. And we also had a third one for agriculture, which saw around 6,800 respondents. And what we basically gather from the survey is that a big part of our economy and the businesses and the people have been very much affected. And this is the reason why we have designed our recovery program precisely to address the top concerns of the consumers and the business sector and the farmers. For instance, the top 3 needs mentioned by businesses, notably micro, small, and medium enterprises, are number 1, the deferment of various payments to government, banks, and utilities. And we have actually put that in the Bayanihan to Heal as one act. And a number of them are continuously being implemented. For instance, the grace period for loans, for rentals, and taxes up to the middle of June. The second request of the business sector, notably the micro, small, and medium enterprise, are tax discounts or tax credit. And that is why we have the CREATE or the Fiscal Incentives Bill to precisely address the concerns of the business sector. And finally, the low interest loans from government and banks. And this is precisely why we have designed the guide bill as a way to strengthen the financial sector so that it can serve more small businesses. As we prepare for the recovery and recovery program, what we have proposed is to do it in a phased and adaptive approach. We started with the emergency stage, and that is basically the Bayanihan one. The analogy, as you may have heard from my previous speeches, is the Philippines, the patient is in the ICU and is being intubated. And we precisely address the key concerns of the economy by through budget and procurement flexibility, the 18 million families that are being subsidized through the emergency subsidy program, the small business wage subsidy, where 3.4 million workers of small businesses are getting their wage subsidy, support to key sectors such as the agriculture and OFW, and also our support to the healthcare system. Now, we are preparing with Congress the recovery stage, And the analogy here is that the Philippines is now getting better and is now in the regular room of the hospital receiving a dextrose. And as we recover, we have been proposing to Congress to consider 4 bills. The first is Painihan 2, which is an extension of the special powers to provide us with enough flexibility to address any form of the crisis going forward. It also has a number of fiscal stimulus to shore up confidence and to create or push domestic demand. It also has the guide bill, which is basically our support to the financial sector so that they can support more and more businesses. We also have the fifth bill, which is basically a way for the financial sector to offload or dispose bad loans and assets so that they can also free up their lending portfolio to serve more businesses. And finally, the create bill, which is the one that gives tax incentives. And all of these have been discussed by Secretary Dominguez earlier, so I will not discuss the details. Let me now focus on the resiliency stage. The analogy here is that the Philippines, the patient is allowed to go home and would require vitamins. And what we intend to do here is to prepare for a healthy and resilient Philippines, where the 2021 and 2022 budget are reprioritized, where we implement a number of structural reforms to turn the crisis into an opportunity. And we have several examples in the past wherein after the Asian financial crisis, we strengthened the financial sector. After the fiscal crisis in 2004, we strengthened the fiscal position of the government. When we experienced higher inflation in 2018, we pushed for the rice tariffication law. So all of these are examples of how the government has turned a crisis into an opportunity to prepare us for a better future. And that is exactly what we will do during the resiliency stage. And finally, there is also our support to the Balik Probinsya Bagong Pag-asa program so that we will see more balanced regional development. The NEDA, together with a number of agencies in the IATF, has prepared a report called We Recover as One, which basically addresses the uncertainty that we are facing today from a number of points of view by providing adequate information, addressing the losses experienced during the ECQ, and preparing for the new normal, hopefully a better normal. And some of the ideas that we are getting as we prepare is that we have to be ready with social distancing as a general norm or SOP, strict hygiene and sanitation protocols. There will be possibly sporadic lockdowns as the virus still need to be contained before a vaccine is discovered. And there will also be different looming threat in the minds of individuals. And all of these need to be addressed. And we will do so with the resiliency program. So the resiliency stage is basically the continuation of our recovery program, where we intend to use the 2021 and 2022 budget to align our priorities precisely to address this new normal and to do a number of structural reforms to turn again the crisis into an opportunity. And the good news here is that they really will not cost the government much, but the returns to the economy and to income and jobs are very high. As we prepare the 2021 and 2022 budget to build health and economic resiliency, we will be focusing on the Build, Build, Build program, which have the strongest impact on growth, income, and jobs. We will also redirect a lot of our resources to building the digital economy or infrastructure. We are also going to focus a lot on the health sector through the infrastructure capacity building, including housing, water, and sanitation, to allow more people to benefit and to practice the minimum health standards. And in all these, we would request for more flexibility in procurement and budgeting so that we can deliver and move the resiliency stage faster. At the same time, we are going to have the following criteria for reprioritizing the build, build, build by making sure that they are consistent with the available fiscal space. And we will focus on projects that are the most ready and implementable and with the highest impact on the economy and on jobs. And we hope that the private sector, our partners in the infrastructure program, will be ready to deliver, and that we are also open to ideas and support in the area of health and the digital economy. On the other hand, we are going to propose to Congress a number of structural reforms to strengthen our various sectors or priorities in the government so that we are ready for this new normal. So among them in health will be building more health infrastructure, the production of pharma-grade medical supplies, strategic inventory of medicines and equipment, better UHC implementation, research and development, in particular towards a virology center and a pharma development center. In agriculture, the idea here is to enhance productivity and support a value chain so that we leverage on the collective comparative advantage of each stage in the agriculture production. And we have already started with the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Fund, and we will do so on with the other crops. Part of this is making sure that we are able to individualize the collective land titles that have been given to agrarian reform beneficiaries. We would also propose the consolidation of land management to enhance economies of scale and production, and also possibly to better use our scarce land resources through a progressive idle land tax. We will also be supporting the agriculture sector by rationalizing our logistics sector. We will be pushing for a complete digitalization of the government so that all transactions in the future will be online with the government and also with the private sector. In terms of investment, we are keen to expand our foreign direct investment by passage of the 3 economic liberalization bills, so the amendments to the Public Service Act, the Retail Trade Liberalization Law, and the Foreign Investment Act. And we will also modernize our investment promotion agencies to proactively seek out the desired investors and grant them tailor-fitted incentives. Some other structural reforms that we are proposing include ease of credit and also Industry 4.0, which is innovation, digitalization, and entrepreneurship that the DTI is leading. We also want to look at our labor market policies so that we prioritize keeping employment regardless of the movement of jobs. But in the very short term, we are working with DOLE to provide more temporary and targeted wage reduction to keep jobs and also to retool the skills and push for pension portability. And in terms of social protection, introducing an unemployment insurance or unemployment savings account while moving forward with the national ID to deliver all social protection digitally. And one of the objectives here, once we have national ID, is to provide a bank account per family so that starting next year, everyone that is in need of a government support will be able to access that in the most efficient manner. In education, it is about options to continue learning remotely or through online learning. We also need to have a complete rationalization and modernization of our public transport system, including the automated fare collection, so that everything can be safer as you don't need to pay cash and transmit the virus. And finally, to incorporate in our disaster and emergency response to include health-related disasters. In all these, the NEDA, together with the other agencies of government, will be preparing a revised midterm update of the Philippine Development Plan, which will focus on how we can become a more healthy and resilient Philippines. And this is an ongoing effort, and we look forward to your suggestions through the Sulong Pilipinas consultation. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you very much.